I've been in the region for 3 years, and I certainly have not had the experience with the generations of trust issues that have fed into this situation, but I do understand how a traumatic situation like this can have a real impact on individuals, on communities, and on children for a long, long time. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I think it was about 4 years ago now, there was a major flood in Cedar Rapids that literally wiped out most of the downtown area and wiped out neighborhoods where I had grown up and where I had friends and family that still lived and lost their homes. And while that was a different type, very different situation, it was caused by nature, it still caused intense trauma in the community that those people are still feeling. And even though I wasn't living there at the time, I felt that trauma as well. I sat there in front of the TV and my heart just bled and tears came into my eyes. How could this be happening in my community? The situation that's happened here in the St. Louis area over this past couple of weeks has been a much more traumatic situation than that could have ever been, because this was caused by human beings. This was caused by our neighbors. It's involved our neighbors. It's touched people in very intense ways. Some of you might have saw the other day, I sent a message out through Facebook and Twitter and to many of our friends and partners in the region. And I talked about the notion that what my hope would be is that everyone on all sides of this issue can take a step back and put children first. There's an unlikely ally of our world, of the work we do, out in Washington, D.C. He's a retired hedge fund manager who is in the process of writing a book about how government, local communities, individuals, and corporations, in his estimation, should make important decisions. And it comes down to a very simple premise, that if every single decision we make, if every single action we make, if every single piece of legislation that is considered is looked at by how it would impact children, we would make better decisions in our government, in our businesses, in our families. When we're deciding if we should go to war, look at it from the perspective, how does that war benefit children, or does that war hurt children? If it doesn't put the needs of children first, it's the wrong action to take. And as I've sat back and I've looked at what's been happening around here, I keep saying, where are the children? Where are they in this conversation? And if everybody on every side would just put the needs and the future of children first, we would make better decisions, we would take better action, and we would bring peace and justice to our communities. That might seem like a simplistic measuring stick, but if a retired hedge fund manager can push that and believe in that as deeply as he does, it seems that those of us that are impacted by events like this in our own communities can certainly look at the children who surround us and who we work with and put them first. In the home visiting field, there's this big study that's been going on called the ACEs study, and it's all about how traumatic stress can impact children for a long time. A little bit of stress at a young age can have tremendously negative impacts down the road. So we need to do everything we can to make sure that children are not in stressful environments. Children are in loving, caring, nurturing environments that are going to help them be good citizens and productive and successful in their lives. Stress at a young age can seriously damage those prospects. So the work that all of you do, the work that everybody in this building does, means the world to the future of the children in this region and beyond. So that's why we're here today. We're here to talk about this, to talk about how we as a team, how we as a parents, as teachers, family, can help bring healing to the region, healing to the families most affected. And I hope you need to bear with us a little bit. We put this together on short notice, so that's why we're having a brown bag lunch instead of having lunch brought in. And some of our presenters that are planning on being here today are also involved in other aspects of what's happening in the community. So we're still waiting on a couple of them to be here. So we're just going to take this as time for an open conversation and to figure out together how we can bring healing and peace to our communities. I do want to thank one of our board members, Maxine Clark, has joined us today. Maxine, thank you for joining us today. Your support is very important. And at this point, I would like to turn the microphone over to our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Cheryl Balboma. Cheryl.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. I was really hoping, how many of you have heard of Murphy's Law? I was really hoping that he would stay out of our business today. My guy showed up anyway, but we're going to move on. Scott said a lot, many of the things that I was going to say as well. So we here love children, love families. That is why we exist. That is to try to assure that every child grows up healthy and ready for school. And that involves their families, their parents, and that involves the communities. So we all have a common purpose for being here. I certainly do. I love parents as teachers. I've been a part of the parents as teachers family for a long, long time. But just the concept of parent as first teacher, hits the heart. I am a parent, and I am a parent of a male child. And probably if we were to share stories, which creates the multi-layered complexities around this issue, I would have my own story. So part of the reason for doing this, and I do want to acknowledge the staff, but part of the reason for having this was to have multiple perspectives. And if you have your sheet that was supposed to guide you, serve as an agenda, was to bring many perspectives to the table, and unfortunately our other two panelists have not shown up yet, just to show just how complex this is. And so Reverend Tracy, and I call her Reverend Tracy because I know Tracy, and I call her Reverend Tracy, but she is a leader in the community. She is not just a reverend. She's a nurse, she's a leader, she's a spokesperson, and she is a mom, first and foremost. And if you were watching 9 Network last night, you would have had the opportunity to listen to Reverend Tracy talk personally about her experiences with her 2 sons and why they were not marching for justice, and then to talk about her 2 sons with her daughter and the difference between her daughter's confidence as a young black woman versus her son's lack of confidence in dealing with the law enforcement. And it hit my heart because she was speaking some truisms. So it's unfortunate that she's not here, because I'm pretty sure she would have talked to you as parent educators of parents as teachers, working with families with young children. She would have been able to identify some things. She identified with you. So that's unfortunate. I just wanted to bring that to you just in case you didn't see that. So we're here for you. This was planned by our staff development committee, whose work is to make sure that staff personally, professionally grows through studying issues like this, but also to branch out and to reach out to our community, and you're part of our community, so that we can share in these things. The more we talk together and learn, the better all we are together in serving our communities and our families. So I would like for the staff development committee to just stand up. This is your thing. Just stand up, identify yourself, just stand up. We just want to thank you, thank you, thank you. So our panelists were recommended, because our staff is involved in a lot of things that we do here. So I just want to acknowledge them because this is for you. So our PAT leader, known to the world, PhD world and beyond, Dr. Peggy North-Jones has been a part of us for a long, long time, and she is here. And it's unfortunate that we won't be able to have the dialogue that we were hoping to have, the panelists to have a dialogue amongst themselves, as well as the facilitated discussion with you. So we're going to be flexible. Is that okay? You like flexible? All right, good. And there's chocolate or there's some goodies over there, so feel free to get it. And we can make coffee for you or what have you to fill this time. So most of you know Peggy. Some of you may have been with Peggy yesterday, but Peggy is prepared to be as flexible as possible. And so I'm not going to stretch this out anymore, just allow Peggy to take over and we'll take it from there. We'll follow your lead. All right.
Okay, well this is, we talked about, we are talking about trauma, and I can tell you my trauma level is about 10 at this point. So I'm very happy to look around and see lots of friendly faces, because I know you'll all be kind and nice, right, and be okay. A lot of you were at the session that 3 of us did yesterday. How many of you were there? So we're going to try and do some very different things, but also knowing that the people who weren't there, I want to cover some of that with them. But a lot of what was already said, I think, is important. So, but I just want to preach to the choir again, because in the last 10, 15 years, what we have learned, I've been around for a long time. I've been doing this for 42 years. I'm at the end of my career now, so I have the chance to kind of look back, but also integrate. And the things that are being done now in terms of brain research, the things that are being done now in terms of brain research, in terms of helping us understand what's going on, are incredibly significant, particularly in these kinds of situations. Because those of you who are older, like me, know that if you go back 20, 25, even 15 years, when we thought about little kiddos, what did we say? They're okay. They're going to be fine. They're too young to remember. It won't affect them, or my favorite, they don't know what's going on anyway. Thanks to the work of Bruce Perry, Alicia Lieberman, a lot of the people around the country who do fantastic work, we know that's not true. That everything that happens, even now we're beginning to grasp, even in utero, that's beginning to affect kiddos from the beginning. Brain development, all of you are well skilled in brain development. You've trained in that, you trained that, you talk to parents about that. You know that the synaptic connections that are going on happen at such an amazingly fast level that we have to pay attention to that. And I remember years ago sitting in this room and hearing, like on his name, from Yale, founder of Head Start. Ed Ziegler say, when there was a discussion around the table about no summer sessions, and Ed just stood up in his quiet way after a while and said, oh, I didn't know children stopped growing in the summer. So we stopped from May to September, doesn't work. The same thing is true here. So I've had the experience over the last years of being at sites, not of the physical violence. I wasn't at 9/11. But I was at Katrina, I was in Joplin, I have been in numerous communities where we've had parents shot, because I work for the state of Illinois, the whole state. We've had kids shot, we've had kids witness parents being shot, picking them up from childcare. So we've been through a lot of these kind of violence and trauma events. And what stands out all the time is that we have to wrap our arms around, we can do something about this. We can do something. People heard me say yesterday at Katrina, when we were there 13 months, after we were in Baton Rouge at Renaissance Village, the one thing that the parents at Early Head Start and parents as teachers that we visited said, why didn't somebody come and tell us what we could be doing with our children? Because I sat in a trailer. The one mother I was talking to had 2 kids under the age of 5 and was pregnant, and she said, I've been sitting in a trailer for 13 months, scared, worried about my children, and having no idea what to do. And what we did simply was like the paint stick with the feeling faces. We said sing, we said read, and they were just astonished that those were important things to do. And you all have that in your repertoire. You all know that. You know that, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but those are the things that are phenomenally important. So that's kind of the overview. What you do matters. What you do in the next months will matter. Bruce Perry said after Katrina, one of the biggest tragedies in the world was that there wasn't a focus, as Scott was saying, on early childhood. And those are the kids that are going to grow up and carry those memories forward. These are the kids in Ferguson who are going to grow up and carry those memories forward. And if we don't intervene, if we don't support the parents, if we don't support the community to know that we can make a difference in how those kids take those memories forward, if we don't take that in a way that says to these kids, let's talk about it, let's think about it, let's see what we can do, what we can make out of this, then we fail. Because these are the kids that are our next generation. They're the world. They're 25% of the population, 100% of our future. And we have to think that way. So you all, and I'm so happy that you're in this room. I'm so happy those of you who had the opportunity yesterday, because hopefully this can tweak your thinking. It can put some thoughts in your head about, yes, I can do something. I can do something on every home visit. I can do something on every move in a classroom. Every parent I talk to, I can make a difference in terms of what children are going to take. Does this make sense, everybody? So I know that you're already underworked and overpaid, right? So we're just adding a little more responsibility on you to add this to the things that you need to take as we move forward in the next days, weeks, years. I want to backtrack, though, and start at a different place. And that's because what the research also tells us is you've got to start with yourself. Just as you will tell parents how you feel and think and are being is critical to how your child's going to do, we have to start with everybody in this room knowing where they are. And that's why I'm sorry the diversity is not here in the panel, because I think they would have much to add to that. But I'm going to start with just having you watch a video. And while you're watching it, I want you to think about three things. There are two characters in the video. I want you to think about both of them, their perspective, but I also want you to think about yourself. Okay, so I want you to touch your own feelings and the thing. And I will say, for some of you, this video from a movie may be a little hard to watch. And if that is, I assume you'll take care of yourself. But we just need to watch. And it's about 4 minutes. It's the one, the cougar? No, the cougar one. Okay. About your own feelings. Anyone willing to share what you were feeling as you were watching? Fearful? So how did that feel, though? Tense? Okay. So you were thinking, you keep supporting, as long as you have a support system. What about gut feelings, though, that people were sensing as you were watching? It's 4 minutes. Your heart was racing?
Stomach was contracting.
Stomach contracting. Anyone cover their eyes? Put your eyes down, not looking? Yeah? Because there was that ongoing stress. That was 4 minutes. 4 minutes of watching. What's it like for 4 hours? For 4 days of that ongoing kind of trying to escape. But the end message, for the cub, what does he take with him? Does that go away? Is it imprinted on his brain permanently if he sees a 4-legged thing walking around? Hopefully, so maybe he learned a lesson. Stay closer. But it's imprinted, correct? That doesn't go away. It may ease over time, but it's there. And what about the ending? That's, I think, where you commented. Hang in there, right? What was the reunion like? Loving, hugging, what was the feeling that you got then in your gut? Relief? Comfort, did your shoulders go down? And you just kind of start relaxing?
Just let her take it. It didn't make him feel, or her, or whatever, feel badly. She just embraced it. Let her make her feel bad.
What a great point. She just openly accepted and didn't scold. I don't know what happened afterwards, you know what happened. But no scolding, just licking, and the sounds between the two of them. So metaphorically, if we want to think, are you that, you don't have to lick people, but are you that person? Are you that support? Can you help parents be that support? Because the message is, if you have a support system, if you have we call it a safe base, safe haven to go to, and you can get there, it makes a difference. Now, why does all this matter? Because what happens to the brain when you're in that kind of stress situation? What happens?
Cortisol hormones.
Cortisol. Do you all know that word? Cortisol, cortisol, cortisol. That's what's happening on the streets when people are distressed. When the police had high cortisol levels. The marchers had high cortisol levels. When cortisol levels are high, do you think? So when someone says, move to the sidewalk, and your cortisol level is high enough, what do you hear? Blah, 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 blah. You absolutely don't process those words. You've seen it with a kid lying on the floor having a temper tantrum in the middle of Walmart. And you say, get up, you're acting silly, or you're embarrassing me, or you can't behave this way. The kid just hears blah, 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 blah. But we ping off the nonverbals. How much of our communication is nonverbal? 90%. Depending on the research, you look at 70 to 85%. So you see the nonverbals, you do not process the words when your cortisol level is high, because where are you? In your brainstem. And you only have 3 reactions in your brainstem. What are they?
Survive.
Fight, flight, escape, or go crazy. You've got that one there if you need it. So when your cortisol levels are high, you can only fight or flight. And what we know is for children exposed to chronic violence, kids who are in these kind of situations of trauma, their cortisol levels elevate. And coming back to what Scott said, what's so bad about that elevation of cortisol in these little guys is what? Their brains are developing. So my brain's going the other way right now. So big surges of cortisol for me aren't terrible. They're not wonderful, but they don't have the same impact. But if you're constructing a brain, if you're making neuronal connections, and you've got cortisol zapping all over the place, what happens? So I want to show you a little quick video about that. Can you put on the one that says brain change? You have to figure out, I think, a way that you can translate that information into ways that supports parents' thinking so that they can begin to understand that. So while we're at this point, what I'd like you to do at your tables or in your little window groups or wherever you are, is I'd like you just to go back so far and talk about, in terms of watching that video and hearing about brain, where you are. What you think in terms of your feelings about everything that's going on and now looking forward to, because many of you are going to start work on Monday, right? Doing this work? Yeah. Or started today? Okay, Tuesday, I'm sorry. So just chat with each other about what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Some of you have been to a bunch of training in the last 2 days. But where are you at? What are you thinking? What are you thinking are the big things for you to do? What's going to be hard? What are you working on in your own head? All about you, not others. Okay? Go ahead. You might want to introduce yourselves to each other if you don't know each other first. As you're moving forward in your conversation and getting to the end where we're going to stop, I'd like you at each table to pull out 3 emotion words that you all can kind of agree on or floating around, or that you can at least share understanding of. 3 words, 3 emotion words. Anxious. Worried.
Confused. Avoidance.
Avoidant.
There's guilty over there. Somewhere.
Someone's guilty with you.
Harvesting.
Guilty. Disappointed. Hopeful. Okay, so we get some of the other side. Hopeful. Anyone else?
Anticipation.
Anticipation.
Oppressed.
I'm sorry?
Oppressed.
Oppressed. Others?
Depressed.
Depressed.
I'm kind of excited. I know that's kind of a weird thing, but when you see on the news, I don't know if anybody saw it today. I think it was today or yesterday. They started showing lists of the amount of stops that they had in Ferguson, and showing how many of those. I think it's close to 6,000 stops. were African American
And they were white.
or they were white. Or today, when they started showing how many, in terms of what a population is and what their police force is, what the percentage is. You never would have, even a year ago, I didn't know that information. It was not on mainstream news.
So excited that things are emerging.
Excited that
Information's
the
coming.
truth is out there and people are accepting it. People are accepting, because so often if it's not your perspective, you haven't lived it, someone can tell you the story and you're going to go, no, it doesn't happen that way.
So accepting
Right.
and excited. One more. Anyone else? So we have a, thanks, Donna. So we have a sprinkling of words in there, right, that have to do with hope and positive, but most of it's negative. So what's the problem with that for you all in this room? It's what you bring. What a brilliant comment. It's what we bring because it's what we're surrounded by right now. How many of you have turned off the media exactly for that reason? It's like, I'm done. I am done hearing the guy say, and there's a man picking a cup up off the street. I wonder if he'll get shot. You know, they're just filling 24/7 airtime. So that whole thing. So we get overwhelmed. There's toxic. You heard toxicity? How many of you have ever said, I have a toxic friend? I'm fine when I go there, and when I come away, I think, what happened to me? You know, we have a lot of toxicity floating around. And what's important is you are going to see families who have toxicity all around them, who may be fighting and struggling to get that changed, but it's toxic. And what we have to do, again, let's go back to the little ones, because they're in toxic environments. And you all, again, it's preaching and choir, you all know, do birth to 5 kiddos pick this up? Yes. They pick it up from the nonverbals. Babies being held, what do they pick up? The heart rate, the feeling of tension. So we know depressed moms, when they hold babies, give a very different relationship base to that baby. So you've got kids who are in toxic surroundings, much of it. And you know what's interesting? When we get stressed, what's the first thing we throw away? Play and laughter. We don't have time for that, right? So think of a highly stressed household. Think of a household that even knows the young man who was killed. Think of relatives, and think of a little 3-year-old running around that house. What's the 3-year-old going to be doing? Being goofy and silly, right? Might even get out a finger and play shooting. And what's our first response to those kids if we don't understand children? Stop that. In an angry voice and tone. Do you know what's happened? Don't you understand? You can't do that? And what's the 3-year-old hearing? Blah, 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 blah. Children at funerals. Any of you been to funerals where there are little kids under 5? What are they doing? Running around. And if there's a TV, what do they want to do? Watch the television, right? Or if they brought their toys. Because their world in that moment is about play. And when as adults we stop playing, or we stop smiling, or we start laughing, we think that we're helping in some ways to those kiddos, and what we're doing is confusing their brains even more. So do we have the brain video now? Does it work?
Yep.
Okay, can we play it? It's right there, it just needs to be different. So again, this is Dan Siegel's work. So when I say to you, why are you acting like a 2-year-old and they're 5, what's the answer? I have a 2-year-old brain, excuse me. Now it doesn't have to stay at 2, because we can help bring it up. But you heard his words, exposed to chronic toxic stress over and over, days, months at a time. And I know a lot of you work with children who you worry about that anyway, right? Many of them come from chronically stressful environments. And when we add a crisis on top of that, our job becomes all the more important.
How much can a parent, though, change that in an environment where the stress is going on around them? They live in an apartment building where there's a lot of yelling,
Wonderful question.
or they can hear gunshots, or they can, the conversation at the laundromat is about, stress, and how do you like,
Could you hear a question? How much can a parent actually do if you're in the laundromat where shots are going off, or you're in an environment that's you can do lots. Because at that age, not true with teenagers, very different, but under the age of 5, if I just come and start stroking her hair and hold her, or if it's an infant, if I put that infant particularly skin to skin, we know that's terribly important, that's skin to skin, immediately the cortisol levels come down. What we tend to do, and that's why your question is so good, is we tend to talk, right? We say, come on, it's going to be okay. You'll be okay. Words, not important. You want to give them social emotional language. But what these children need is laughter, touch, comfort, ways to engage. And the answer to her question is, yes, you can do a lot because it's all about relationships. All the way children are getting their information at this age and stage is through relationships. With their peers, with their teachers, with their families. So it's the relationship that's so important. So and we're going to talk a little bit about, because we need some concrete, the number one, which you nicely take us to, is create a safe environment. Now, I can't change the neighborhood, but I can change the environment in the relationship with my child. And I said I asked Renee's permission, I said I was going to use her as an example because I visit her classroom, and last year after the Connecticut shootings, they were all told to make sure that you have a plan, make sure the children know what to do. That's a big order with 16 kids in your class. Okay, I'm going to you can't do that with words with kids. So I saw her do the most amazing thing. She created a corner in her classroom, the furthest place from the door, behind, like around filing cabinets, and basically told the children, we're going to practice getting in this safe place so we can be safe. And she did it with them numerous times. It's kind of game-like for kids almost, but she had a signal, and when she said the signal, she got them there. And they all came, and they learned to do that quickly. That's creating a sense of safety for the children, but also, what did it tell them about her? I'm a safe haven. I'm going to make sure we create a space where you can be safe. And every single parent can do that for the child. Does it happen all the time? At night, when they're in their bed and they get scared? This is where we have to stop and think. Because typically we're going to say, get back to your bed, right? But when stress levels are high, and when children under the age of 5 need comfort, we have to shift our thinking from that old way of thinking of, you need to grow up, act your age. We're not going to do this. And the baby, if they could talk to you, would say what? Why not? Feels real good to me. Or as my daughter said when she was about 2 or 3, you have daddy to sleep with, I don't have anybody. That's a really good point. What do you do with that? Because if I'm really scared and you're telling me I have to go, children can't self-regulate. And when their cortisol levels are high, they can't. But that's why when you start up your classrooms, or you start visiting and you've got a kid running 100 miles an hour, and you're going, you have to settle down, you have to settle, those are useless words. Because again, if they had that little bubble over their head, what would it say? Well, I'd like to, but I can't, my cortisol levels are a little high. I always tell people, use the example. You slam your hand in the car door, and your neighbor comes over and says, oh, you'll be okay. What do you want to say to them? Shut up. Go away. You're not helpful. But we do that to kids all the time. Brush it off. You'll be fine. Especially in times of trauma and crisis with children, we cannot say brush it off. You'll be fine. Because they're not fine. They wouldn't be reaching out to you if they were fine. They can't self-regulate under the age of 5 without your help at times when cortisol levels are high. Does that make sense to everybody? But how many times do you hear people say that? You'll be fine. Be strong. Come on, shake it off. I've seen it in the ballpark. Kid falls on the bench in the bleachers, and they're crying, and someone says, oh, come on, you're fine. Well, I don't think so. My knee doesn't seem to think I'm fine.
I was going to ask a question. Peggy, I'm sorry.
I remember when I was little and he would fall on the ground and my dad would say, let's check the sidewalk and see if we
See if
cracked
we
the
broke the
sidewalk.
sidewalk.
And it did sort of make it different, you know, because then you start to feel sorry for the sidewalk instead of for yourself.
What she's saying is you check the sidewalk, which to me, how I interpret that in my thinking is that's playful. And when you're playful with people, sometimes that does work to bring the cortisol levels back. Donna, and there was one over here, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Do you remember?
Yeah, talking to parents about cortisol and all of this stuff, some of our parents probably wouldn't get that. So I'm thinking a different word that I think I want to use is distract. Let's distract from what they're hearing by, let's do this. Let's give hugs. Let's give our baby dolls hugs. So I think sometimes we need to find a different word to use.
I think that's a great point. And I think Becky Bailey's terms work very well. You're in your front brain, you're in your back brain. If you want your child to calm down, they can't be in their back brain. So let's get up to our front brain and see if we can calm down. But I have to help you get there. You can't be, that's why timeout is so stupid. Timeout is one of the dumbest things you could ever do in the world for children under the age of 5. Go to the corner and calm down. Hello, I don't think I would have gotten in trouble in the first place if I knew how to stop biting and calm down. So over there, I don't think I'm going to pick it up, unless you're putting a psychologist in the corner with me. But we tend to think if we send them off. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't times children need to calm. You can certainly say to a child, I need you to sit down, I'm going to sit with you, we're going to calm down, we're going to breathe, you can do all that. But to send people off, to handle their stress, to handle any of this stuff, just doesn't work in these little bitty kids. And that's why, again, going all the way back to what Scott said, this is a different population. And you need to be voices out there in the wilderness saying to people, finding a way. I love your question. Let's find what will work with this family. Because the other thing I haven't said is all these families are different. You've got families who can do really well, and you've got families who are hanging on by a thread. And if you start saying, I need you to help regulate your child, they're going to look at you and say, who's regulating me? I don't think I can do this. I've got a drug addiction problem, or we're homeless, or we don't have food, and you want me to worry about nurturing my... Well, my response is, can we at least throw a ball back and forth? Let's take it right down to that level with not even using some words. That's what you can do. You can play. You can smile. Singing. Is there a reason protesters sing on the street? It's calming, and it's part of cultures for eons and eons and eons. People sing. Singing with little kids is wonderfully powerful. It brings stress levels down. Donna put up, I'm going to put up a little bit of this PowerPoint. This was done by Strengthening Families Illinois, and I wanted to share a couple of this because we're throwing around words. What is trauma? It's a psychologically distressing event. Look at the words. That's outside the range of usual human experience. Has your last 11 days been outside the range of usual human experience? I don't know you, but I didn't take this class of how to go visit families when. This is all new for us. How to bring kiddos into a classroom and help them when. So that's one. And experiencing or witnessing an event in which a person believes his or someone else's life is in danger. Can you go to the next slide? You may hear in some of the work you do about post-traumatic stress disorder, and I will just tell you that in the field in general, there's huge controversy about children under the age of 5 being able to have post-traumatic stress disorder. And a lot of that work comes from, if you've got a soldier who is a double amputee from Iraq, how does that compare to a child who's heard shots at the laundromat? And can you label? So nobody knows where that's going to go, but right now we don't use post-traumatic stress disorder a lot with children, but we talk about post-stress. This comes back to you. This is the mama bear at the end of the rock. Not all children who experience trauma will respond in the same way. You've all worked with families where one child who grew up with an alcoholic mother and an abusive father is a lawyer or a Supreme Court judge and the other's in prison. What's the difference in those two kids? We've spent lots of time researching that. And basically what it comes down to is resiliency, what we call resiliency, and it has to do with protective factors. So Carl Bell, who's a psychiatrist in Chicago, if you go to the next one, has this saying that I'd like you all to take with you, and if you'll just read it and say it with me. Risk factors are not predictive factors based on protective factors. So what are protective factors? What are those?
Resilience.
Parental resilience.
Social connection.
I'm sorry, Cheryl?
I said parental resilience, and of course then.
Parental resilience and
Social connection.
social connection. So when you've got, and somebody said that earlier about the support system. Who was that? You need a support system. If you've got the support system, you start developing protective factors. And what we want for these children, while you're in this room, while you're thinking, while you're going through this, is you're all going to be protective factors. That's your role in the time to come. We need the community to supply protective factors. We need everybody to understand early childhood. And we need to say, how do you give these children the protective factors they need? Because that will keep them from having trouble.
Peggy, can I go back to what you said about the parent who is trying to tell their child to buck up or get over it? Because in working with families around that, one of the things that parents have told me is, but I have got to prepare him for what's to come, and he's got to be strong. And right now you're talking about resiliency, and I would love for, if you could, I know we're putting on the spot so much today, but if you could comment a little bit about the other side of support from the parents. So the emotional connection, the protective safe haven, but then the building of resilience and coping strategies within their child and themselves. I know that's big,
It is big.
but I think it's huge for
It
parents.
also starts really, I don't think they're incompatible. I think if you're resilient, you know how to protect yourself. You know, you've heard people give you wisdom and you take it with you. How many of you have a little cue that you hear inside yourself, that you grew up hearing over and over again? Mine, I often hear is, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. But they're as simple as things you hear at the table. You know, chew with your mouth closed. We take those moral and those kind of social judgments with us. And one thing we just touched on very briefly yesterday in Florissant was social justice. You know, is social justice part of resiliency? Absolutely. And if we're going to raise children, and in the classrooms I'm in, I see this all the time, you're trying to teach children to respect individual differences. You're trying to teach children that being fat doesn't make you a bad person. So why do you want to talk about that? Being a different color skin doesn't make you a bad person. And those of you who had that brilliant experience with 2-year-olds, you've seen that. They don't even know there's different color skins. Have you seen that? I mean, they just got, there's a gentleman I worked with at University City Children's Center who had this blonde, blue-haired little girl who was just adorable. And she was 3. And they took pictures of her with her 2 best friends for a Christmas card. She wanted to make this Christmas card. And both of the children were African American. And she went to visit her grandmother in Ohio, and she went running up to her grandmother with the card in hand and said, look, Grandma, which one do you think is me? She had no clue. That was not in her categorization at that point. And you'll see that with kids all the time. What happens by teenage years? You know, what happens? So I think that's part of building resiliency, part of giving kids strength. And we haven't gotten there yet, but there's nothing wrong when you're talking to children in the days to come, or when you're visiting families, to say, it's all right to say to your child that you're really sad. It's all right to say to your child that you're really mad. It's all right to say, I'm scared. Those social emotional words need to be in families' vocabulary. It's okay to say to a child, I don't know if it's going to keep, if they'll keep saying all these good pieces of information on the news, or whether it'll go under. Those kind of conversations sometimes, particularly parents who are overwhelmed, get very scared about talking about. And I think we need to encourage and empower them to be able to say, it's okay. Some parents took their kiddos to the marches. Did you see children there? Babies? And we had all different reactions. Joy had one reaction, I had a different reaction to seeing a child in that. And I think it all depends on how you help the child to understand that. It may be for babies, just the noise and the action and all the stuff is way overwhelming. But you can say to a child, we have work to do here. And I can never remember this guy's name at Harvard, so I'll just skip his name. But he talked about Katrina and what happened in the stadium where they put everybody, the violence, the rapes, the horrible aggression that happened. And his work, he's a neurobiologist, and what he said is, and a psychiatrist, When you put people in those kind of situations with their cortisol levels out of control and give them nothing to do, that's what you get. That's what, have you ever seen a bunch of kids with nothing to do in a tight space? That's what you get. So what he said would have changed the entire dynamic of that stadium was to give everybody brooms and shovels and garbage bags or hammers and nails and send them out and say, at least 8 hours a day, go out and do this.
Would you have closed schools in Ferguson, Florissant?
I don't know. I don't even know.
Because I wonder if that would have been, you know, kids going to school and being in the classroom.
Well, oh, to that point, okay, yeah, let me come back to that's a great, I was not sure where that was coming from. If you give people work to do, and you keep them busy, including little children, how many of you had classrooms out of control and you just say, okay guys, everybody needs to go pick up or do something? We put them in a scheme to do that. In communities, if you say, we all have work to do, we need to do this work, really important work, let's get out and do it, it changes. And what I think we have to keep remembering, because we're the bearers of this news, it doesn't just change people's feelings. It changes brain chemistry. It changes what you can do and how you feel and how competent you can be. And so doing that. So I don't know the answer to what I would have done, but I can respond from being in Ferguson, Florissant yesterday, that closing the schools for a lot of kids was very, very frightening and very distressing. What do you mean my school's closed? Is that bad guys are in the school? Or what am I supposed to do? And I think finally a couple of the resources in Blackjack or Florissant opened up and they had play materials and things for kids to do. Makes all the difference in the world. If we're going to close the schools, we better have something. That's what happened at Renaissance Village when they were able to build a playground to get people out of their trailers and at least have a movie screen for families to go to. You can't create an unnatural situation for children or for adults in communities and expect there not to be more and more difficulty. It's just not how we work as human beings.
Peggy? I kind of, and I think this is appropriate for us as early educators, when I think about not necessarily the infants, but the toddlers, the many toddlers we saw in, participating in the rallies on the shoulders of dad, mama, whomever, with the t-shirts and chanting, hands up, don't shoot. How do you balance that? I mean, it's too bad we don't have our panelists here who could share some wisdom with us in terms of, as we said, buffering that trauma, because you can have two different kids who participated in such a thing. One kid will understand what it means, okay, in terms of justice, and the other kid can become violent.
Absolutely.
And will forever, very aggressive, frightened and very aggressive, and grow up that way, and fight law enforcement, whatever. So us, we as early educators and those who are working with parents directly, and if you're in Ferguson, Florissant School District or any of the school districts, there are many people there with their children, what do we say? How do we discuss that with families when we know what the result can be if the wrong messages were received by those young toddlers?
It's another fabulous question, and I think it's got so many sides to it, and that came up some yesterday too. What do you get when you get kids in the classroom and you start talking and they go, policemen are bad? And you got half the class saying that, and then other children saying, oh no, there are helpers.
Yeah.
What do you do with that dialogue? And I think if you saw the clip yesterday from Edwardsville, did you all see? From the superintendent of schools in Edwardsville, who had to stop conversations in the high school because he thought it was going to threaten the getting along of the children in the high school based on the level of those conversations. So you all are in a tough situation because if you have to be very careful of not giving your value judgment at the same time you're educating. So you're walking an amazingly difficult line. Because you can't go, I don't think any of your administrators want you to go into church, into a family and say, now here's what you need to be doing. But you've got to figure out, so maybe one thing is you give them both sides to the equation. You give them both pieces of information. Probably where I would go is to talk about the importance of family values. I don't know what your values are, but it's so important because the most dangerous children to put out there are kids who don't have any awareness of their family or community or faith-based values. Kids who have values can push against those when they're teenagers. How many of you are teenagers? You've seen that? I'm not going there anymore, or you're not going to drive me to church, or they push, but they come back at some point to a better understanding of themselves. But I think you can tell them, and that's what, and it's probably even in your curriculum somewhere, about talking about values, about talking about who you are as a family, what you believe in. Because I can imagine, Cheryl, kids saying, how come I didn't get to go and be there? They were having that parade, and I didn't get to go. And that's a great opening for a conversation.
And not that I'm not rushing this, but it's important because of who we are, what we do. But on the flip side of your agenda, at the bottom there are questions related to what can PA do, what can we do specifically to help parent educators? How do we continue this conversation? How do we build this into training? Because, and here again, I'm sorry that Reverend Tracy is not here, but she could have told us the story about her sons and her daughter. And her daughter, standing up before the law enforcement, and her two sons shying away and feeling like they were going to get in trouble if she didn't shut up. But they're two very bright young men who've had traumatic experiences. And they have not been a part of the marches with their mom. So I think even when you get into, that's why it's multi-layered and important that we continue this conversation, because we have the gender issues too.
Yeah, it's also the way kids are socialized.
Yes,
like
yes.
girls could go in a corner in color and have a sort of a introspective experience, and that's safe. And boys, they're always active and physical, and
exactly.
pick up a stick and turn it into
exactly.
a weapon of some sort, just for fun. I mean,
Right.
they're not really trying to harm anyone, but it is the way that they're socialized. I know my mother was a civil rights activist. She took me with her everywhere. She's not with my sister, who's 2 years younger. My sister has a totally different view of life than I do, totally different. And we were just 2 years apart in the same family. And my mother had a reason for it. I don't know what it was.
I was going to say, she obviously picked up on that something.
Yeah, but thank goodness she picked me, because I don't know where I would be if she hadn't, shared those experiences with me. And my sister has no recollection of even the 60s happening. She doesn't know anything. She said, "That you didn't go there. You didn't do that. You didn't have that happen." And I did, and I'm so glad that I did. And I think there's a positive to it. It's how you bring children into it. There must have been a reason she didn't include.
But let me dovetail on something she's saying, because I think it comes back to another point we said before. It depends on the resiliency and the strength of the parent. You have to have a parent who can handle that, because otherwise you get tension and confusing messages. So empowering, it all starts from us feeling comfortable ourselves. So the question that Cheryl's asking is something everybody has to grapple with, because you're going to face it. It's going to come up somewhere. And you have to know what is stirring up in you, what you think your response is going to be. Maybe you want to practice in your peer groups or with each other about what are you going to do, because she's right. Just gender differences in your classrooms are on visits. You're going to see little girls just doing one thing, and boys maybe knocking each other over, or playing with figures and having the police marching, knocking down the protesters. Play for children is the way they deal with their misunderstanding, their understanding. After 9/11, many boys particularly did block play, where they built buildings and then took planes and crashed into the blocks and knocked them down. And if you don't have an understanding of that that's therapeutic for a child and healing, we tend to say, don't do that. That was a bad thing that happened. You don't want to do that. Instead of, oh, what are you doing? What's happening to those buildings? And being able to generate a conversation. So at the healthiest level, Cheryl, I think it comes to, you got to be able to have these conversations with children. Right. You've got to be able, in your family, hopefully sometime you sit at a dinner table, not just in a McDonald's sitting in the back of your car, that you can have a conversation that brings forth, what are you thinking? And that's the other thing I want to leave you all with in terms of thinking about, don't tell children what they're thinking. Don't tell them that you're worried about what they saw. Ask them, what did you see? What do you think's been going on? Why do you think school was closed? What's their opinion? Because they have all differences. There's a wonderful quote about a child who was talking to his mom and said he'd seen all the stuff happening on television, and this boy was killed and things were really bad, but he said to his mom, I know what's going to happen. And she said, what? Thinking that he said, they're all going to live happily ever after, because that's how all the books end. Yep. That was how he was putting it. So if you had gone down a long road with him about, I know you're worried, I know he'd already moved to happily ever after. which we can only hope. But you've got to ask children. You've got to ask the parents you visit. You've got to say, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's on your mind? We can't assume. One of the biggest things in trauma work is never assume. Never, ever assume that you know what someone's feeling or thinking. Because everybody's different. Children are different, parents are different. Katie?
Back to the pretend play and we're talking about the blocks and everything. And I know we touched on it a little bit yesterday, but I don't know if I ever felt like I understood how I should react to that. Because I know we've had gun play in the room, like, oh, guns kill people, we don't play with guns in school, and kind of move on. But we also want them to work through some of these things that they're, so not only in the classroom, but how to talk to parents. If parents are concerned, well, they're trying to shoot their little sister all the time.
This again is a multi-layered, I don't know if you hear what you say, but what do we do about gunplay in the classroom? You know, they don't have to have guns, right? My son always took apart the vacuum cleaner and duct taped the tubes together and made grape rifles. You know, and these kids have seen assault weapons. The kids that play with camouflage figures, now the camouflage figures have walked down their street. You know, so I don't know if you've seen that viral YouTube where there's a tank driving down the street, and these two really cool teenage boys are in the little car next to it going, wow, dude, that's so cool, bad language. They're so cool, look at these tanks, you can't even see the guy. And then there's a time lapse, and then you hear the kid say to the other kid, wait, what does that mean about our town? Have we gotten that bad? You know, so it goes from the level of awesomeness to, in a teenager's mind, being able to process what this means. In a little kid's mind, what are they going to think? Such cool stuff. Machine guns, whatever. So in answer to her question, I think there's a real dilemma because the research, and this will go against, I'm sorry, administrators, research does not demonstrate any significant contribution to gunplay to violence in children. None. People have played cowboys and Indians forever. They've played with cap guns, they've played with all, and there's no indication that it contributes. But if you have a rule, then that's, I think, the place you go with kids. In this classroom, we have a rule that you can't shoot things at people. But the conversation that comes from that is, what were you thinking when you were playing bad guy, good guy? And talk about the bad guy, good guy stuff. Now again, we talked about this a little yesterday, the bad guy, good guy stuff's gonna be different depending on what household you're in and what room you're in and what kids you're talking to. Who's the bad guys here, who are the good guys? You're gonna have two little kids playing very differently. You know, the cops are all bad, the other guys are the good guys, and vice versa. So I think it's a conversation. You asked me yesterday about books, and I racked my brain. I really don't know a book that talks about gun violence for children or aggressiveness in that way. So I think it's a constant conversation. And not all of it can be done in circle time in big groups. Because kids are reacting so differently, some of this is going to be taken aside and saying, what are you thinking? What's going on in your mind? Can we talk about it? And I don't know if that...
Why?
So, yeah.
I mean, I've had conversations before when kids said, well, that person would be dead. They would never, you know, so they were talking amongst themselves, and so then I started saying, well, do you know that was real? That they wouldn't be here anymore, kind of thing. And we've had those kind of discussions in past years, just with a few kids that were dealing with it, but I didn't know.
The other thing to remember, just to take some of the tension off all of you, do kids learn one trial learning? Repetition, repetition, repetition. So unless it's an incredibly traumatic experience with a child playing guns, if you stop that gunplay and do redirect or distract and go so, that's okay. If it happens day after day, then you've got to be at a place. And we haven't said that, but I want to give you the 80-20 rule in trauma and in most things. 80% of the children, 80% of the families, 80% of the community people are going to do okay with all this. 80%. 20%. And you'll know what to do with those 80%. You'll know how to answer the questions. 20% are going to have you scratching your head. 20% are going to need more than you can do. 20% are going to send you looking for resources and referrals. That's just the way the population tends to fall. It's very, very hard to deal with that 20%. So you've got to build a resource capacity. You've got to know, parents as teachers may be able to help you, your district. You've got to know what to do in those situations where you're going, this looks more than what I was thinking. This doesn't seem like the normal.
David Levy wrote a book, The Wonder of Boys, and in there is a great section about the pretend play with guns.
The Wonder of Boys is the name of the book.
David Levy. And it's a great section on how important the gun play is.
Gunplay is. But you can't put that in the face of your district.
Right.
So if there's a policy, but you can tell parents at home, if they're playing guns, let them play. I mean, did any of you grow up playing guns? Space, you know, we played space guns because it was in the 60s when space was just starting. We had these incredible weapons. I want to show you one other video, and then I want you to do some talk around your table to keep in your head of everybody has their own shark music. The teenagers actually in this program in Washington named it shark music because they said that's what it felt, it's the Jaws music. But that's what it felt like, is that the shark is coming after you. But we all have that very different. I was bitten by a dog as a child. Anyone else? So when you see dogs, does your shark music go off?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Mine still does. But it depends. If there are conditions, if it's loose,
Depends on
if
the dog.
it's coming at me, if it's a black dog. So I have certain associations. All of you have situations, something happened to you early in life. Anyone in here afraid of snakes? You ever have an encounter with a snake that started that? Why do you have shark music about snakes? Your mother was afraid, so she gave you her shark music. So all kinds of things give us shark music. So then I need the circle of security one. So this is the graph, and as we work in groups, I just want to give you this because I think this is a graphic also that helps you. This comes, as I said, we don't need to recreate the wheel. All this stuff is being done by heavy-duty researchers all over the place. This is called circle of security. And if you can see the image, does it get any bigger? What you need to think about is there are two sides to the circle. The top is the secure base. The top is the secure base, the bottom is the safe haven. And what the top is about is going out to explore. The bottom is about coming back. And for children birth to 5 who grow up healthy, who have a good sense of themselves and others, this circle is complete for them all the time. The hands you see at the other side is the helping hands. So, I'm going to take it away from trauma for a minute. You see children at a playground, sitting with their parents or their caregiver, and they decide they want to run out and look at something. Have you seen them do that? Yeah. But then a dog walks on the playground, or a stranger, what do? Run back. A healthy family, a healthy community allows people to go out and to come back without judgment either way. So let's go back to the bear and the cougar in the very beginning. The mother bear let that, or the bear went, let's say the mom let him go to explore. He's a bear cub, but then he was welcomed back home. When children in times of trauma come to you with hard questions, and they want to go out and talk to other people, and hear other values, and hear other discussions about guns or about bad people or what, and then they come back, they need to be able to be welcomed back. And if you look at some of the words, on the top it's, I need you to support my exploration, watch over me, delight in me, help me, enjoy with me. And if you think of some of the children that you know who have the toughest time making it, do their parents delight in them? That's such an important thing of early childhood. I've actually had parents say to me, I don't think I can go to one more baseball game because it's so boring. That's so sad. I don't care if it's boring, get over yourself. And delight in your child. Delight in them. The littler guys who are 2 or 3 who bring you a picture and go, look what I made, look what I made. You have to delight in their picture. You can't say, what is it, or I don't think that looks exactly like a person. You have to delight in them. That's the healthy part of the top of the circle. Help me, enjoy with me. The bottom is, welcome my coming back to you. And that's protect me, comfort me, delight in me. And the last one is so important, organize my feelings. I'm losing it, I heard a pop, I think the bad guys are coming, I'm crying my eyes out. You know the kids who climb up your leg and they can't get close enough? You need to be able to support that. You need to be able to say, I get that. Then we have the heavy-duty conversations. If I've helped you organize your feelings, if I've helped support you, if you feel good about coming to me, but also venturing out, the unhealthy part of the top of the circle, what would that look like? in terms of this trauma in community? What would that look like?
Isolation.
How would that be in a family?
The parent keeps them in. They
Keeps
don't
them
let
in, right?
explore.
You can't go outside. You might even find some families that are willing to send their kiddos to school.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a little traumatic Monday morning?
Yeah.
Special ed kids on those little buses?
Yeah.
Let's put them on that bus. As a mom, a dad, a caregiver, do you think I might have some sharp music? Yeah.
Our family's not going out for groceries right now. What is that saying to the child that it's not even safe enough
To
that
go
our
outside.
basic needs can be fulfilled?
Exactly. What else? Did you have an idea too? What? So if you don't let your children go out, if you're in the classroom and you're saying, well, we can't do this, 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 and this, then that whole top of the circle is missing. And it might have to be missing at times. There might be moments it's missing.
I do. My grandchildren came over last Friday, and my other son came with his step-grandson, and his wife has not come here, whatever. So I heard, my son did not tell me this, but I heard the grapevine, that she did say to him, no, don't let him go outside. And so my son said, no, it'll be fine. It's fine. But so when he told my daughter-in-law that, who has two that went outside, she says, why would people think I would let my children out in an unsafe place? But and so it's all perception.
It is all
I mean, it's not all perception. There's tons real. I just mean there's a mix of perception and reality.
Exactly, and hence the sharp music.
Right.
That's what the sharp
Her,
music is.
she had a lot of sharp music.
She had a lot of sharp music. The other guy's going, what are you talking about? Let him out.
Right.
But we can't judge and we can't condemn. What we do know as a community and as schools and as people supporting parents, you need to get back to this complete circle. It's called the circle of security for a reason. This is what raises happy, healthy children. The ACEs score that Scott talked about, we talked about that yesterday. That's the adverse child experience score. Often that correlates with the lack of the circle of security. So kids who have a lot of violence in their home, a lot of trauma, will get higher adverse scores. And the predictability from that score that those kids will die earlier, will be involved in prison activities, or go to prison, will be involved in criminal activities, do drugs, all starts in the birth to 5 level. That's scary stuff. So we want to build this circle as securely as we can. The only other thing I want to do before we go into groups, you all got this handout. I gave you 2 handouts. Again, I don't want to recreate the wheel. You have little listeners in an uncertain world, and you have the one that's tips for early childhood providers from the Judicial Violence Committee. You have both of these. On here, for those of you who are really looking for the concrete tips, it gives you a breakdown for infants, for toddlers. It tells you symptoms you're going to see, and it also tells you what you can do. Stay connected, keep in close touch, turn down the TV, enjoy your child. Some of the same stuff we're talking about. Laugh and be silly together, read together. Do all kinds of things that are playful. Even if you only do it at bedtime for 10 minutes, you don't have to do it all day. You don't have to be fake. And what are you going to see for symptoms? The same things that are said over and over. You've heard psychiatrists interviewed this week. You've heard same symptoms. Clinginess in some kids. Rebelliousness in others. Aggression. Changes in eating habits. Changes in sleeping habits. Irritability. Sounds some things like you might experience when you're in a little trauma. Very similar. But with children, they're not afraid to show it. I might try and control my crabbiness. Kids will just be crabby. And particularly for those children who haven't been sleeping well, we heard yesterday about all the noise outside and how hard it's been. If you've heard protesters, you've heard shots, you've heard lots of helicopters overhead. If kids haven't been sleeping well, and that continues over the weekend, and they're coming to you, or you're going to do home visits, and kids are tired, if they haven't gotten adequate nutrition because they haven't been able, you're going to see those are the fundamental things kids need. Nutrition, sleep, large motor movement. If you don't get those things, you immediately have a protocol for some changes in behavior. So you're going to see that. But what my field says, and what we tell people is if you see it ongoing, not just once or twice, but if you see ongoing struggles the child's having, or you're talking to our mom or dad, it doesn't start bouncing back and says, or grandma, I just can't do this. I'm so over, and it goes on. My rule of thumb is usually about 6 weeks. Then you need to look for outside resources. You need to call in whoever you call for additional support, because you don't want that serotonin level or the cortisol level to be sky high for so long that it keeps changing, making brain changes. And you know what? You can only do so much. Do you all know that? I know you're already freaking out. You got to teach, you've got to do social emotional support, you've got to communicate with parents, you've got to build relationships, you've got to take care of whatever your own stuff is. And then we've got to now watch really carefully for those people who are struggling. Make sense? Okay, so what I would like you to do is, at your table, I think everybody has a pretty full table, you might want to move up to the tables, if people will join the table. We'd like you to address the question, does everybody have a copy of the agenda? Did you get those? The questions that were put out there for you, and that everybody's very interested in, what do parents as teachers programs need going forward? What resources already exist, including agencies and other providers? What more can the National Center do as a convener of resource? What are your other suggestions, or what are our suggestions? What words of encouragement and support do we offer families? And I'm just going to tell you, they didn't tell me to say this, but I'm going to tell you, go pie in the sky. You know, don't be afraid to say, oh, they could never do that. Just put out there what you think is really going to help you, and I would think next 6 months. Semester ahead, what do you need? Because you've had a couple days of conversation here, but you all know it's not enough, right? 3 months from now, 3 weeks from now, you're going to go, well, we didn't talk about that, or I wasn't expecting. So you're going to need ongoing kind of contact in some way. So use your fantasy, go for what you think would help you, and let's see if we can generate some listen. Does one person at every table take the job of recording the ideas that come up, please? Okay. Here's your cookbook. Go, and here's your meaning. You have to make meaning in your family. You have to make meaning in yourself. And you're going to watch, I think it'll be amazing, you're going to watch little kids make their meaning with each other. They're going to construct meaning out of this. They'll need direction and help from adults. But meaning making is something that drives us all. And then all of us need help looking to the future. So I'm hoping in what you've put down on your paper, which we're going to collect a few of these and we'll leave them with National Center. Can we have, let's start with one idea from each table. So can we start here? Everybody's sucking on their suckers again. Did that feel self-regulating to you? There's something about that, and especially these are horribly sour, most of them. And they just do that. They put your brain in a different place. Good. Can you do that? Sorry. Okay. You have to use the mic. I did. Go ahead. You have to put it right by your mouth.
All right. One of the ideas we had on here is that parent educators for safety could go in pairs instead of alone, depending on what areas they're in, or pair families up if need be.
Okay, so one of the considerations is safety for home visits, right? And you can go in pairs, but that just keeping that on the table about how do you do that? What is the feeling? And you know, again, that's a really hard thing for all of us to deal with. If you have that internal alarm that goes off, no matter what your race is or your belief system or where you're going in neighborhood, it's scary. You know, I can go, I'm heading south, I'm going to be in some parts of Mississippi, in the back roads, that will be scary for me because it's unknown. I just don't know what's there, and it's dark and it's different, and my shark music goes off. There's two parts to that. People will tell you you need to pay attention to your shark music. We always do, but you also then need to have a plan. And so this is ideas about a plan.
Okay.
Thanks. Back there? Renee?
We had said, since we really don't know what the kids are going to need, to reconvene at a later time with a facilitator to help lead us in a direction.
Okay. So some kind of future training or future just connecting so that you can get together, because you don't know what the kids are going to say, do, and you really also keep that part of yourself. You don't know how you're going to respond. Are you going to get tired fast, or what's going to happen? Okay, thank you. Back here.
Okay, we had one pie in the sky idea to fund group meetings with parents, like the MEL kind of concept, where they would meet for ongoing and they would discuss what their needs might be and be support for each other. So it's funding development too.
Yep, don't have heart. Funding a group meeting for parents, that would be kind of peer-led, or do you have a facilitator there, folks? Okay, so a parent peer group, but facilitated.
Right.
You have to have a money. She's saying, get in touch with. This is really good. Anyone who needs money, Maggie's saying, just get in touch with her.
That's just what she said. We need money.
But you know, that's so important. That's such an important idea. I'm doing a lot of work with Race to the Top in East St. Louis with care providers, and I am amazed at the number of times they stop themselves because they say there's no money for that. And then there'll be somebody sitting at the table from Deaconess or United Way or somebody, and they'll say, wait, BJC. And they say, wait, we may be able to help with that. There's a lot of growing interest, thank goodness, with you little kids. And I think maybe coming out of this trauma, maybe one of the good things will be, out of this tragedy, is we may see some money rising to the surface to help rectify some ask. Don't stop yourself. Thank you. Good idea. Did you get that one? Okay. Back here.
We were talking about a concern that we had for the future. October, the grand jury will come up with their decisions. And that's our concern, is how are we going to serve our families in October? And
so just the unknown.
the unknown.
What's it going to look like in October?
And how do we support our families?
How do you support families? Good. It's a good one. You guys are really smart. These are great, great questions.
I just want to add a little bit to those, because some of them we also had. So like the reconvening, we decided we really want to hear what these guys, the panelists, had to say. So we want another opportunity to be able to listen to what they have to offer us.
Okay, so see if we can reconvene
Yes.
with the two people who weren't here or representatives of those
Right.
parts of the community.
Right.
Okay, great.
Okay. We were also saying that we have numerous families that they have younger children, older children, teenage children. So we want to be able to cross that bridge amongst all the grades to be able to say, okay, this is the district's policy on wearing certain t-shirts to school. Or, you know, what are they saying in the high schools that we can kind of support and
When we get questions.
reinforce, I guess, to those parents that might not be getting that information. Or
Another
even,
great point. So what you're saying is you need to be community informed.
Yes.
In your districts, in your community, you need to, just because you're going to visit a mom with a 2-month-old,
Right.
doesn't mean that you don't need to know the general spin. So someone may be able to help with that in terms of how do we get community news out. Joy?
The one thing I do know that is if students wear a shirt that says hands up, don't shoot, nobody's going to say a thing about it. They just wear it.
But that would be great for them all to know, because you might say, oh, I don't know if that's such a good idea, or the mother might say that.
Yeah.
What if kids are wearing the t-shirts that I've been starting to see that have the police badge that says I report?
My sense of it, but this was last Sunday at the administrative meeting on Sunday, the shirts that go with this particular situation, at that point they weren't going to make a deal out of any of them. But the kids still can't wear the NRA shirts with the guns and all that sort of other kind of shirt. But things that are being worn related to this, as of last Sunday's opinion, they're going to let it go.
But to your point, it's an excellent question, because Joy, I think, can tell you she's finding things change every 24 hours.
Right.
So for you in parent homes and in classrooms, is some kind of and certainly with social media and with all the electronic communication we have, there might be a way Joy, to get that message out, or in other districts, how do we keep informed? How do we keep informed of policies and procedures? Over here?
Oh,
Yep.
anything to say.
I'm sorry.
They're making me talk. Oh, it's on.
Yes, on.
Okay, they're making me talk. We talked about, I'm from Riverview Gardens. Hi, Ford. And we were talking about really serving the west side of our district through personal visits. Double-edged sword, a lot of the parent educators aren't feeling safe to go over to, especially that area, and how do we keep them safe versus the family, also but still doing our visits. Families aren't feeling comfortable even to come out. Then, we've had several families that are like, I'm not coming to you and you shouldn't come here. So how do we get these resources to these families is really, so we talked about, we brainstormed for several ideas, which always came back to funding and how do we fund to get them, we could do.
So you're right up here on the first line, feeling safe, but then looking to the future. How do we continue to do our jobs, have everybody feel safe, including the families, and I think that's going to be, to several of the other points, that's going to be ongoing. You can't sit here and answer that.
Right, the long term. Phyllis had a great idea, though, about maybe connecting with some of our faith-based providers that have vans and buses, to maybe do some group connections at the churches. Right. That would be a great resource, and we do have, the district has some really good connections with our faith-based leaders.
Good idea.
So that might be something.
Faith-based as a way to connect.
Yeah.
Good idea, thank you.
Using Downwoods Community Center.
Did you have one, did you need to add something?
I was going to just reiterate what Peggy was talking to you, Peggy, about at our visit. It's just starting our visits, maybe with some extra gross motor activities, or the classrooms. Teresa said that they had talked about that in Head Start, starting your classroom mornings with more gross motor and active.
Go in with play.
Go in with play, right. That's right, and maybe even talking more about feelings throughout the school year, and feelings, how it's important to talk, for parents to talk to their children about feelings and expressing feelings, and more than just that age-appropriate time or whatever.
So 2 big agendas, more motor movement, gross motor movement, and the other is social emotional language, increasing social emotional capacity for kids to express themselves. But I thought it was a fabulous point that they made, because if you don't do gross motor movement, if you don't get these kids up and moving and using that, you're going to end up with more behavior issues than you want to deal with. Kiddos need to move. You all are going to need to move. Aren't you all tired of sitting right now? Yes, exactly. So think about how that feels. And just the self-regulating stuff we do a lot of. When I say we're finished and you politely get up because I said we're done, but then Cheryl says, please line up orderly on your way out. We'd like you all to leave quietly and in a line. How does that feel? Well, we do that to kids a lot. Bubble in the mouth, line up, really contrary kinds of things to do with kids who are under stress. It just doesn't work well. You're asking them to self-regulate in a way that doesn't make sense. So just think about how you can do that. Last but not least, right?
I'm not sure if this has already been said, but we don't know what's ahead of us, so we would like for it to be open for the support that we need, because we don't know what's going to happen.
So leave communication open with National Center, make sure that they're ready to take your calls or your information and move from there. Did you all have some at your table or no? 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 You were moving around? Okay. All right. Joyce?
This just sort of crossed my mind as I reflect and hear other people.
This just sort of crossed my mind as I hear everybody talking and thinking how I'm feeling. I think we need to understand more about fear and what it's like to be afraid. I mean, when I think back to when I really just started my career, I had one terrifying experience on a visit. And I was so consumed with my own feelings, I couldn't serve my family as well for a while. So I think we need to acknowledge our own fears as well and say, I need a break. And administrators, we gotta give it.
So we may need, you might want a training on fear. The neuro aspects, the neurobiological aspects of fear, but then also the psychological. That could be a wonderful training, because if you're living at heightened levels of awareness of fear, But it also segues really nicely into the last slide I'm going to show before people line up quietly and leave. Because you can't think yourself out of fear. We need to know more about it. You can't, that's right. You can't use words. You can't just sit home and say, I won't be afraid. Because it's the shark music. It starts up. So the last one is, what about you? We know in this field, in trauma work, a lot of burnout, what we call compassion fatigue. Some of you may have compassion fatigue right now just from listening. There's a final handout out on the table, which wasn't in your original. People who were at the meeting yesterday got that, but it's on home visitors or parent educators and compassion fatigue. But you get compassion fatigue. You get tired. Or if you go to a home and you listen to somebody tell the tragic, tragic story, or you watch Michael Brown's mother and father, you feel something. Because we're all helping people. We're all relationship people. You can't help but get compassion fatigue. So one of the things I want you to be thinking of a lot, and Joy, you were kind of getting there with the fear. What are the issues that you have? And what are you going to do about them? And I'll just throw out a nice acronym from the recovery literature that will help you all, hopefully. And that word is HALT. H-A-L-T. Thank you. Don't let yourself ever get too hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You guys were good learners. Good job. Those are the things that, again, bring up cortisol, knock you down, get you out of your problem-solving joy, that mode that you need to try and get yourself into. How many of you work when you're too hungry? How many of you found yourself at 3 o'clock in the afternoon saying, I haven't eaten yet? Or I'm eating a supper, this is what I got for today. How about angry? Look at the words we have there. Do we get angry about injustice? We get angry about kids being hurt. We get angry about something that didn't go right for us administratively. We get angry. Too angry is the word. Lonely. How can you be lonely when you're around people all day? You ever get lonely? How many of you ever had that feeling where you said, I tried to have lunch with my friend for 2 weeks and I can't even get to her on the phone? We need, and we talked yesterday, they were laughing with me, you all were remembering, I said when my kids were little, they could not believe when I would come off work as a therapist that I would go to the grocery store and talk to the clerk. Or we'd be in a toll booth and I'd say, hi, how are you? Are you having a good day? And they'd go, Mom, you talk to everybody, stop talking. They were mortified. But why did I do that? Because I listen all day. You get lonely sometimes because the bottom line of trauma work and work in tragedies is listen, listen, listen. Listen to the children, listen to the adults, listen to the community. Listen to your peers. But if you're doing all that listening, sometimes you need to be listened to, and you get lonely. And the last one, tired. Not happening here, right? Everybody always gets 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. No, you get tired. So HALT. That's self-care. And you, I'm preaching to the choir, you cannot take care of people unless you take care of yourself. You have to have a faith base, you have to have some kind of spiritual renewal, you have to have some kind of way that you emotionally fill yourself back up, the empty bucket idea. You can't do this work. I'm so impressed with all of you for your listening today and your work today, and I'm so impressed with what's coming ahead that you're looking forward to doing. But please take care of yourself, because we don't need wounded warriors along the way.
Those of you that live up in North County, tonight is Food Truck Night, Ferguson. Let's support North County.
And music at 501 Ferguson.
There you go.
There's a concert, they're doing lots of stuff on the radio that I've heard about. Let's support the community, don't stay away. But again, it stirs all kinds of emotions in people, and how do I do this? So, any final thoughts or questions anyone have? Scott, you're going to take all this and harvest what we harvested and be in touch with people?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you all very much.